Attacking mobile phones or application is one of the skills that we always want to master as hackers, but it looks impossible since most of the content is just repeating itself. No one is teaching us how to do it properly. This is why I woke up and decided to make this series of videos where we're gonna start playing mobile hacking labs at mobilehackingLab.com, which is the sponsor of this video. Mobile Hacking Lab provide the best training, courses, labs that will take your skills from a script kiddie that relies on tools to a hacker that understands how things work. Check the description below for free courses provided by Mobile Hacking Lab, and for you guys that are subscribed to our channel, Mobile Hacking Lab offered you a 15% discount on the Android fuzzing and exploitation course. This is a special offer that you don't want to miss. Click the link below for more information. Now, let's begin. To get started, we need something basic. I chose the Food Store Lab, which is free and they give you an environment where you can practice. So let's take a look at the application and see the functionalities that we have. As we can see, we have a login and a sign up. Since we don't have an account, let's create it. Username Hisham, password Hisham, address, no idea. Click sign up, account created. Now let's get back and sign in with this account. Hisham as the username and the password. We are in the food store. We have a credit of 100 and we can order a burger, rice or pizza. That's it. No couscous, tagine, and believable. Anyway, let's get back to the spot. As you can see, 100 in credit is not enough to order as much as we want. So we need to abuse this functionality somehow. First of all, we're gonna have to connect to the network through a VPN. Click in the connect button. Let's download the VPN file and copy it, paste it in my Kali VM. Open VPN and we are in. We are connected now to the network where this phone is located. Now to connect to the phone itself, we need to use ADB, which stands for Android Debug Bridge. If you have experience with Android apps development, you are familiar with ADB. So basically ADB will allow us to connect to the phone through a shell. Since Android is based on Linux kernel, that means that we will have a kind of Linux shell access to the phone where the app is installed. To connect to the device, we use this command from the connect panel. So ADB connect IP address and port, we are connected. Now we just type ADB shell and we are in the phone, SU and we are root. This is the best thing about using Mobile Hacking Lab. The phone is already rooted, so you can do whatever you want. Next thing to do is get in the food store application. So applications in Android by default are located in data app. Let's search for it. Then cd to this directory, cd again. As you can see, we found the base.apk file. We can just pull the application to our directory by typing adb pull the path of the application and save it in our current directory. Okay, we have the application. What can we do now? Well, we're gonna use a reverse engineering tool called JADX, which is gonna allow us to decompile the APK file and see its source code. A hacker once said, if you are good at reverse engineering, everything is open source. Anyway, let's open the app in JADX GUI and choose the application base.apk. Now the application is loaded. Let's take a look at the code to understand what we should do. The application was created with Kotlin and the code by default will be in com.mobilehackinglab.foodstore. We have different classes: DB helper, food items, login activity, main activity, sign up, user. Let's start with the login activity. Quickly, an activity in Android is a class that is associated with a screen UI. In our case, the login activity is a class associated with a UI of the login interface. Let's get into the code of it. The first thing is the login activity class. Then we declare a DB helper object which is going to be used for database operation. We're going to take a look at it later on in this video. Then we have this getDBHelper method, which is basically going to initialize the DB helper object that we have created in the top and return an instance of it. Otherwise, if it's null, it's going to throw this initialized property access exception. Then we have the setDBHelper method, which is going to set the DB helper object. Then the onCreate method is called when the activity is created. It initializes the DB helper object and find the IDs of the views like the username, text field, ID, password, and login and sign up button. Why it does that? Well, so it can listen for any activity like when you insert your credentials and when you click login or sign up button. And then it sets an on-click listener on the login button. So when you click in the login button, it's gonna call the onCreate lambda 1 method and pass to it the username, password, the current object, and the view. But if you click in the sign up button, it's gonna call the onCreate lambda 2 method, which as we saw before, is gonna redirect us to the sign up interface. Now, the most interesting function is the onCreate lambda 1. because it gets called when we submit our credentials and click login. So we save the username and password we got from passed parameters as string, and then we create a user object from the user class, which represent the user by its ID, address, isPro, password, and username. We use the getUserByUsername method from the DB-helper class. This method will basically get the user object from the DB by its username and return it. Let's get back to the login activity. So if the user is null, then it will return invalid credentials. Otherwise, we will see login successful. And then it's going to set the credit variable to 10,000 if the user.isPro property is true. Otherwise, it will be set to 100. And that's what we saw in our case. We only get 100 on credit. So our goal is to get 10,000 and buy whatever we want. Then after setting the credits, we use the intent object, which is basically a mechanism that is used to call other activities. And we pass to it the current activity, the login activity with this keyword, and the activity we want to move to, which is the main activity. That is basically the dashboard we saw that contains the food to buy. Intents has more functionalities like navigating from one activity to another one, passing data inter-component communication, and so on. Now, in this activity that we have just moved on, we will put all our data, the username, credit, address, as pro user, and we start the activity. Great. Our main goal is to be able to log in as pro user that has 10,000 on credit. Let's check the sign up class to see how a user is being created and see if we can abuse that functionality to create a pro user instead of a normal one. Again, we have the onCreate method. This method is called when the activity is first created. It initializes the activity and set its layouts. Then we have the most interesting part, which is setting an onClick listener on the button object that basically holds the sign up button. So we are setting a listener on the sign up button. When the user clicks on that button, it calls the onCreate lambda 0 method. Let's jump to this method so we can understand what's happening. First of all, there are some checks on the field, checking if the fields are not empty. Then if they are not empty, it initializes a user with 0 as the first parameter, which is the ID of the user. Then OBJ, as you can see here, the OBJ is equal to the string of the edit text 5, and the edit text 5 is equal to the username property. That's mean that the object holds the username. Then the object 2, which is the password, and false, which is isPro property. That's mean that the isPro property is always set to false, then 1 and null. And then we call the dbHelper.addUser method and pass to it the newly created user object. Let's check this addUser method and see what it's doing. The first line ensures that the user object is not null. If it's null, an exception will be thrown. Then the second line is used to obtain a writable instance of the database. This allows for modifications such as inserting new records or updating and so on. Then those 3 lines are used to convert the user password to a byte array using ATF8 encoding, ensures the byte array is not null, and convert those bytes into base 64. It does exactly the same thing for the address, but not to the username. Then there is an SQL query where it inserts the username, password, address, and isPro to the user's table. Then it uses the DB object, which is an instance of the database, and use the exec SQL function to execute the SQL query. And at the end, we close the database instance. Now you know what to do. The parameters are passed to the SQL query without validation, which means we can exploit an SQL injection to access to the main activity as a pro user. But the password and the address are converted to base 64. So even if we inject some SQL query in the password or the address field, it's going to be converted to base 64. The only parameter that is vulnerable here is the username, because it's not converted to base 64. Let's copy the SQL query, insert into users, username, password, address, isPro, values, and then we put some values here, Hisham as the username, Hisham and password, some address, and then 0 for the isPro attribute. Let us exploit the username parameter. So instead of passing a valid username, we can pass Hisham AL and then close the single quote, then the password encoded into base 64, close it, and then the address encoded into base 64, and then close it, and then want to set the isPro attribute to true, then close semicolon dash dash, which is used here to comment the rest of the query. Now let's do that in the application. We insert Hisham AL as the username, we close the field, and then this is a base 64 encoded format of 46, and then the same thing for the address, and want to set the isPro user to true, close the query, and add dash dash to comment the rest of it. Add a password and an address that will be ignored because of the comments in the username field. Click sign up. User created successfully. Let's log in. Hisham EL and 46. We can add them with EDB shell input text and it's gonna be added. Click login. There you go, 10,000. We can buy as much as we can of burgers. Thanks for watching, and please, if you want us to keep going with this kind of videos, subscribe, like, leave a comment with any question, anything just to make this video reach more people. Don't forget to check the Mobile Hacking Lab fuzzing and the exploitation course to get 15% discount, which is a really good deal, and have a great day.